Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Welcome back into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I am so excited to get The Process back rolling. This is Touchdown Alabama's premier recruiting show where I break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news on Touchdown Alabama's YouTube page. Unfortunately, I was unable to do the show over the last couple of weeks because of some personal things, some big life changes as I recently got married. I recently made a big move, so it was unfortunate that I was unable to do the show for the last couple of weeks, but I am excited to get back with you guys, excited to talk about Alabama recruiting. And today we're going to talk about a lot of different things. I'm going to give a breakdown of where the Crimson Tide's 2022 recruiting class currently stands. Also take a look at some visitors who will visit the University of Alabama over the next couple of months, because it looks as if the recruiting dead period will be lifted on June 1st. This dead period has been in place for more than a year, so I am pretty sure prospects in silver recruiting classes are excited to finally get back on campus. So I am going to talk a little bit about that. But before we get a chance to dive into all of that, I do have some recruiting updates to hit you guys with today. So with that being said, let's get the process started. Today, we are going to hit on a couple of recruiting updates that happened over the last week or so, and I'm going to start with the Crimson Tide extending a couple of new offers to in-state prospects. One of those offers went out to a 2022 wide receiver out of Clay Chalkville High School in Alabama, and that is Marquarius White. He becomes the second 2022 wide receiver from the state of Alabama to receive an offer from the Tide, joining Amari Kelly, the four-star wide receiver out of Trussville High School in Trussville, Alabama. Kelby Collins, a 2023 four-star defensive end out of Gardendale High School in Gardendale, Alabama, was another prospect from the state of Alabama who recently got an offer from the Tide. His offer actually came from Nick Saban. I had an opportunity to catch up with Collins. He talked about what that conversation was like with Saban, talking to him for the first time. Be sure to check out that article over at touchdownalabama.com. Nick Saban was working the recruiting trail pretty hard recently in terms of offering guys, especially prospects, in the 2023 recruiting class, specifically focused on defensive ends, as he recently re-offered a 2023 defensive end out of Florida, a guy who is projected to be one of the top players overall in the 2023 recruiting class. And I'm talking about Derek Leblanc out of Florida. You guys can check out my interview with him. He talked about his recent conversation with Nick Saban, his summer visit plans. You guys be sure to check out that article over at touchdownalabama.com. Leblanc is a prospect who Nick Saban recently told he feel he could play early at the next level. If you watch his film, you can definitely see why the seven-time national championship winning coach feels that way about LeBlanc. The Crimson Tide were also included in a couple of top schools lists. One of those lists were released by a five-star wide receiver in the 2022 recruiting class out of Texas, and that is Evan Stewart. He released a top 8 and included the Crimson Tide, along with Arian Bryant, one of the rising defensive tackles in the 2022 recruiting class out of Mississippi. He released a top 10 and included Alabama. The Crimson Tide have recruited a couple of different defensive linemen from the state of Mississippi in recent recruiting classes. One of the more recent guys that they were able to sign from Mississippi was Byron Young. They would look to do that possibly again here in the 2022 recruiting class, as Aaron Bryant listed the Crimson Tide in his latest top school list, which was a top 10. The Tide were also included in a top 5 released by four-star offensive lineman Tyler Booker out of IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. Booker actually has an official visit date set to the University of Alabama. He plans to visit in June. He will officially visit all of the schools currently listed in his top 5. Tide looks to be in a great position with him, as Doug Marrone, the Tide's newest offensive line coach, is building a great relationship with the IMG Academy product. I recently caught up with Booker at the Under Armour camp in Georgia. Be sure to check out that article and all of the content on Tyler Booker over at Touchdown Alabama. as well. But now I'm going to dive into what this show will be focused on, a recap and just a look at where the Tide's 2022 recruiting class currently stand, and also just take a look at a couple of visitors the Crimson Tide could have on campus. Let's get a bulk of our discussion started by looking at the Crimson Tide's 2022 recruiting class as it currently stands. The Tide currently has 5 verbal commitments from prospects in the 2022 recruiting class. They have a commitment from 5-star quarterback Ty Simpson out of Tennessee. With Simpson's commitment, the Crimson Tide are most likely done recruiting quarterbacks in the 2022 recruiting class. They have a commitment from 5-star running back Emmanuel Henderson as well. The Tide could add another running back to their 2022 recruiting class down the line, so that is something to watch out for. They also have a commitment from 4-star tight end Elijah Brown out of Ohio. Alabama may not be done with the tight end position as well, similar to the running back position. So I would just pay close attention to the way the Tide recruits the tight end position moving forward in the 2022 recruiting cycle as well. Moving over to the defensive side of football, they do have 2 defensive commits. And when you look at both of those positions in terms of Robert Booyer being a 4-star linebacker, and in terms of Walter Ball being a defensive lineman, those are 2 positions where the Crimson Tide will continue to recruit here in the 2022 recruiting class as well. But I wanted to start things off by just giving a quick breakdown of where the Crimson Tide's 2022 recruiting class currently stand, and also just take a look at the future with the recruiting dead period possibly being lifted on June 1st. And I think that it's just going to start a crazy set of events in terms of the recruiting world. I predict things will get really crazy this summer, especially for 2022 recruits. I think a lot of these guys will not only take visits, I think a lot of them are going to go on their official visits as soon as possible. They don't want to be in a position where we saw a lot of 2021 prospects wishing and hoping that they could take official visits. I think these 2022 prospects are going to hop on that opportunity as soon as that dead period is lifted. We are seeing guys already setting official visits to the schools of their choice. Looking at Tyler Booker, a guy who I talked about earlier in the show, he is expected to visit the University of Alabama this summer on an official visit, along with a 4-star defensive back out of Texas and Terrence Brooks, a long defensive back who Nick Saban really seems to like. He has an official visit date set to the University of Alabama. So I think a lot of 2022 recruits will lock in official visits, try to get those in, try to get as many of those in as possible. We are also going to see a lot of 2023 recruits try to get on as many campuses as possible, because a lot of them have never visited a lot of the campuses of the schools that they have offers from. So I think we're going to see a lot of 2023 prospects get on campus. I think a lot of these coaches want to see these guys in the camp setting because they were robbed of that during the last summer. So I think they are going to want to get as many prospects on campus as possible, which is going to lead to even more offers. So things are going to get pretty exciting this summer. I think Crimson Tide fans should be really excited to see what that will look like, as the Crimson Tide's coaching staff will get an opportunity to evaluate these guys in person, build a better relationship with them by having them on campus, by talking to them, interacting with them in person and up close. And I think that is something Nick Saban and the rest of the Tide's coaching staff has missed because of the global pandemic. So I think things are going to get pretty crazy if things work out as they should in terms of the recruiting dead period being lifted on June 1st. But the Crimson Tide may not have to wait all the way till the summer once that dead period is lifted to get some guys on campus. A lot of guys are trying to get to the University of Alabama for A-Day, which is the Crimson Tide's annual spring game. Of course, the recruiting dead period is still in place at the moment, so they will not get an opportunity to interact with any coaches, but they can talk to players. That is something that they are able to do under the current recruiting restrictions, but they get an opportunity, as similar to what Alabama fans will get an opportunity to do this Saturday, get a chance to enjoy a Alabama game-like atmosphere, which is something a lot of people have not been able to do because of the global pandemic, because of the capacity that they had to put on the stadium throughout last season. So it will be a great opportunity. A lot of in-state guys are expected to be at the game this Saturday, including guys like 4-star defensive end Justice Finkley, 4-star wide receiver Amari Kelly, 4-star athlete Antonio Kite, along with a couple of in-state guys possibly coming as well. The Crimson Tide's 5-star quarterback commit Ty Simpson has already revealed that he will be in Tuscaloosa, so it could be a recruiting set in terms of him possibly recruiting some guys to join him in the 2022 recruiting class. This is something that we have seen at other programs with the global pandemic going on. We saw some prospects visit the schools visit a school that they wanted to attend. One of the commits of that school actually hosted a recruiting event. This could be an opportunity for the Crimson Tide to do that at this particular point in the 2022 recruiting cycle, but nothing has been released in terms of plans of that. But it would be a great opportunity because a lot of guys are trying to get to Tuscaloosa for a day. A lot of prospects are trying to get to spring games this summer. It looks as if it's going to be a great visiting opportunity before things get crazy this summer. So that is just something to look out for. And that is what I wanted to talk about today on the process. I think things are going to get really crazy. I expect a lot of 2022 recruits to lock in official visits to the University of Alabama and other programs across the country. As I said, Booker and Brooks have official visit dates set. They locked in to visit the University of Alabama this summer. I expect that official visit list to get really long, and the Crimson Tide could make a lot of moves here in the summer. So I think Tide fans should just hold on. I think a lot of positive recruiting news will come as a result of the recruiting dead period being lifted on June 1st. But of course, Crimson Tide's coaching staff are going to continue to recruit virtually, whether that is through Zoom, during those virtual visits in terms of touring the facilities, and also letting guys get a chance to see them at practice, which is something that I'm pretty sure that they have been doing during the spring practice sessions. So I am excited to continue covering the recruiting side of the Crimson Tide in the dead period being lifted. But as I said, that is what I wanted to focus today's episode of The Process on. That will do it for this episode of The Process. Be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Also, be sure to leave a like whether you are subscribed or not. I am going to be here every Tuesday and Thursday evening to break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news. Also, be sure to head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles, get your hands on our yearly print magazine issue, also get an opportunity to read our in-depth scouting reports on each Tide commit in each recruiting class. Then head to the Google Play Store if you have an Android device, or to the Apple App Store if you have an Apple device, to download the Touchdown Alabama app. With that app, breaking news notifications will be sent to your mobile device. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine.